If you're using Jira Assets and you're confused about objects, fields, and views, let's break down exactly how those work. All right, so now we get to jump in and have some fun with our objects. So I'll pull up my IT asset schema as an example. And on the very left side here, I'll collapse this to make it a little bit simpler. We have what are called object types. And these are stored in what is called a schema tree. So you could call these the schema tree or an object type, which is what I like to use. Object type is also the term used in AQL, which we'll cover a little bit later. So on the left, we have our object types. And inside of each object type, we have our individual objects. So if I use the IT hardware and I open that up, we have nested object types under that. For example, IT hardware laptops. So our object type for laptop now has one object, which is just one laptop. So to recap our hierarchy that we have within our asset schema, is we have the asset schema first, then we have each object type, and then under that we have each individual object. So it's very simple, and we do have those nested object types, and we could stack those and nest those however we'd like. Some schemas do have that, some schemas don't have that. If I pull up my test schema, we have no nested objects, so it's totally up to you how you want to organize and create these object types for yourself. So diving into the schema and then these object types, we can create our objects by clicking the create button at the top. So we could go here, we could create a new office as we have already covered. We could also create a new object type by clicking this plus button on the left side. So we could click this, that'll bring us to the create item for object types. We could give it whatever name we'd like. So I'll call this, not test, let's go ahead and use something along the lines of state. So maybe we have different states that we have offices in within the US, and maybe I'll use a different icon for that. Maybe something like this with little arrows. And this is where I could assign the parent if I'd like. I'll leave it blank, and I could create a description if I'd want to associate this object type with a description, and I'll click create. So now we have a new object type for state. You can see that we don't have any objects in here because we didn't create any yet. It's a brand new object type. If we did want to create an object, we click on the create button here or here, and that'll bring us to this screen to create a new object. So attributes are missing, and we'll go on a deep dive into attributes for each object type and how to create those. But we can create attributes by going to this tab here and then adding a name, description, the type, and then clicking add. So one thing to note with the views for all of these objects, object types, is that you might be looking at something like this. This is the default view for as soon as you jump into Jira, and it is similar to what you have with your filter views where you have detailed view versus list view. I do prefer list view because you could see different columns and different values at a glance. So rather than seeing all the details and information about one asset, I could see some information about all assets or a lot more assets. So I do prefer this. Sometimes I do switch back and forth, but just one thing to note, if you do see a different view from mine, you can hit the list view to change what you're looking at. And that does change some of the buttons that you see here and moves them to the right side. Bulk action is really great to change a lot of different values at the same time within this list, but you could also export directly from here if you wanted to do that, or delete objects or print QR codes. When you're looking at the list view, you also have this columns button. So we could jump in and add whatever columns we'd like. That way we can see exactly which address is associated, for example, with which office. So if you did want to see more information on a list view like this is a really great way to do that. So just like our schemas, our object types also have their own settings. So let's dive into that and take a look at what the options are. To find your settings for the object type, you could hover over it, click on the three dots, and click on object settings. This brings you to a page that looks fairly similar to your schema settings, but very tailored and specific to your object types. So in here, you'll see the information for your schema. You could change the name, the icon, the description. This is also where you go to delete a schema. Again, keep in mind, if you do delete this, you'll never be able to recover it unless you have some kind of a backup. In here, we also have roles. So we can set roles and permissions for individual object types, which is really, really great. And we'll be covering this later in the course with a video specific to roles and permissions. Last thing is inheritance, and really the only thing to cover here is this setting here, which is to pass along attributes to objects or child objects, which essentially when you create a child object, or sorry, an object type, what it does is pulls over all the assets and information from the parent object type into the child one automatically. So if you did want that process to reflect, or those object types to reflect the parent one, you could check that box. If you wanted to set it up manually, you could leave this unchecked. Real quick, I know this looks like a lot, and if you'd rather just have me and my team help implement exactly what I'm showing you in this video, that is exactly what we do. We're currently opening up 4 more slots for our Jira strategy. We only run 4 of these per month. If you're interested, hit the first link in the description below. Attributes is just a fancy name for fields. So let's jump in and go over each option that we have available to us. So if I'm looking at an object type and I have the list view open, on the top right, I'm going to see objects and attributes. I can switch between these two, and when I click on attributes, I see all of the attributes listed that we have available to us in this object type, and I could start creating new ones or modify existing ones if I'd like. We also see the same list of attributes when we click on an object or when we create a new object. The same exact list is going to show up here. So as you add more attributes, they're going to be showing up in those two places. So let's go over each option that we have. So we're going to have the default, which contains a list of default attributes that are kind of more standard, you can say. So we have things like text, integer, boolean, float, date time, URL, email, text area, select, and IP address. I'll go over a few of these that I tend to use the most, but definitely look into which ones might be best suited for you. I find myself that I use maybe half of these and the other half are a lot more rare. Then we have a few other options, which I'll get to in a second, but let's go ahead and start creating a few attributes that are going to be standard and used within pretty much every single schema. So we're looking at HVAC models, and we have things like manufacturer, serviceable, which is a status. So I'm going to add a text field, which may be model. So I'll pull up a model, and we select a default text. I won't add any more information like description. I'll leave things simple, and then I click add to add my first attribute. Let's keep going and go ahead and select default again. In this case, we'll select maybe date, and then we'll say install date. And this will tell us exactly which date the HVAC was installed on. So I'll go ahead and add that. Next, let's add maybe something like a URL. So maybe this is going to be, maybe we have a user manual and we're going to link a URL to that. So I'll go ahead and add that. Then let's see what else we have in here. Text area, so this might be something like description or something a little bit longer. Maybe this is going to be more details or more information about this particular HVAC unit. I'll just write details and move this up a little bit. That way we have it right underneath something like name, and we have it showing up towards the top of our object. So that's going to be most of our standard fields. Again, a lot of these can be useful depending on what you're doing. Those are the most common ones that I've used before. Text area, URL, date time sometimes, in text are the most common ones that I tend to use. Again, feel free to check the rest of these out if you're interested in using those. Let's dive into the rest of the types of attributes that we have. So object I'll touch on in the next video in this course. We'll do a deep dive into object relationships and the way that they work. But for now, let's skip that and go to user. So user is essentially going to allow us to pull from the list of users we have in our Atlassian users. So I'll select a couple of groups that we want to narrow this down to. And maybe I want to include a few here. I'll just pull in a few as a sample. And I'll name this, maybe I want to name the tech that's going to be installing this. So I'll add that field in. We also have group, which pulls from the Atlassian groups, very similar to users. We could just pull in group here. And there's nothing to select here because you're really just pulling the list of groups that you have in your Atlassian environment. So I'll add that. Then we have the projects, which pulls a list of your Jira projects if you wanted to do that within your asset schema. I'll show you what that looks like as well. And then we also have status. So status, we already have one of those types of fields here, which is serviceable status. I could add a secondary one if I'd like, and I'll actually just call this status and narrow it down to just a couple of options. So this is the full list. If we leave this blank, we'll have all of these available to us. But if you do want to narrow this down, you can click on whatever options you'd like to only show up when you're looking at this object type and selecting this attribute. So maybe active, and let's see if I could do inactive or maybe dead or something. So just two options here to keep things simple. The last one is Bitbucket repository. Pretty self-explanatory. You could link a repository to your asset schema. I don't have any created right now, so I won't add that as a sample, but you can link your repositories directly to your schema here. So I added all of those fields. Let's go ahead and jump back into our object and go over each of those that we just added. So at the top here, we have model. So this might be like 123, NXZ, whatever model you might call this. And then you edit your field, plain text. So you could add pretty much whatever you'd like here, whatever characters, click the check mark and you're done. Install date. So this will just be a simple date field. Maybe this was installed on Friday. Select that, click the check, and we're good. User manual, URL, you could paste a URL directly into here. So maybe I'll pull up my website, or grid.io, not .com. And I think it's going to need the HTTP. Yep, there we go. So HTTPS:// and then we have a valid link to add. There we go. Tech, again, pulling from our users, specific groups that we applied. I could search for different users. I'll search for myself. There I am. I'll select myself as the user, and now I'm filled out. Group, same thing here. We could pull in a group, kind of like what we saw when we were actually creating the tech attribute. So I'll pull in a random group here just to demo that. Projects, like I mentioned, list a list of projects from your Jira environment. Fairly straightforward. If you ever wanted to pull this list into a schema, you could do that using the projects field. And then status, as I mentioned, I only selected 2. So now we only have these 2 options, active and dead. I'll select active to say that maybe this one is currently in the field and running. We could automate this to say dead sometime in the future, and we'll go over all those automations and how to do that a little bit later. But for now, I'll just leave it as active. So we now have our fields created. Let's say we want to go in and modify some of these fields, whether that's the name or the type of field. We go back to our attributes, and let's say I go to my statuses and I want to add more statuses that I can actually select within the dropdown. So I just click on the 3 dots and go to attribute settings. And I don't think I could actually edit. I think I can edit actually when I go here. So depending on what you're clicking on, you're going to be able to edit that field. The object or attribute settings are located here. But if you wanted to edit the name, you go click on the actual field. Or if you wanted to add more statuses, you click on the statuses here, and then I will select what's going to make sense here, powered off. So maybe it was powered off. I'll click on update, and I could also update the name and description. So status, status, I don't know what to call this, maybe status 2. That way we have a secondary status field. Click update. All of our updates are made now. Go back to objects. Our status 2 field is updated. Click the drop down. We now have another option to add. But what if I wanted, say, 2 statuses, or what if I wanted 2 technicians or multiple groups? How do we adjust that within each of these fields? So when we add these fields, we are limited to some options that we see right up front. And if we want to add more options later, what we have to do is, let's say I'll find the tech field, and I'll go to attribute settings this time. So the 3 dots, attribute settings. And there's one setting here for unique, which essentially allows us to make this unique across your object types. And then there's cardinality. So this allows you to have a minimum and a maximum for this particular field. In this case, the maximum is 1. I could set this to 2 or more, or unlimited. So maybe I want to be able to add unlimited text here. I don't want to limit this type of field. I'll select that and I'll click update. Once that updates, I'll jump back into my objects. And now if I go to tech, you can see that I could X one user out and add another user if I wanted to. So let me see, Alana Grant. Now I could add 2, and there we go. We now have 2 users in the same field. So anytime you want to add multiple attributes or you want to change a field the way that it works, definitely look into the attributes and the settings that you have within the attribute settings. That's going to give you all of the options to change, and also depending on which attribute you select, as you can see here, you could have cardinality, general, and validation. So there's a regular expression that you could add here for date fields and other types of fields. When you go into object relationships, you'll also get a couple more options. So you can include children. You could check include children here. You can make these unique. You could also filter different objects into here. So we'll be going over that in the next training video. Object references and relationships. So this is where assets start to get really powerful. We can start to link objects together, whether that's from the same schema or 2 entirely different objects from completely different schemas. We can link them together and create relationships between the 2. We could visualize those relationships on the object graph and see how they interact with each other with multiple layers. And we could even run automations on those relationships a little bit later, which we'll cover in the training in a later module. So before I go in and start to create those attributes and fields, I want to show you exactly how to create references and why they matter. So these references are these little names that we have here with outbound and inbound references. So provided by and reference are both a link type. And to create those, we can either go to our object settings here, or we could go back to our very home page. And I was in the facility schema. So I'll click on the 3 dots and go to the settings button here. And both of those options will take you to the same place. We could click on reference types at the top. And these are the reference types that we have available to us in the facility schema. Now, if you did create a brand new schema like this one here, I'll show you what that's going to look like, because either is going to be completely empty, or it might have a few out-of-box ones depending on whether or not you created a template and depending on what you have configured for your global settings. So it's going to most likely look like this for you. And to create a new reference, all you do is click this button. and then you give this reference a name. So this could be a link or a relationship or whatever you want. Give it a description, give it a color, and this will help you identify the type of relationship and be able to see them a little bit better later when you actually create those links. All you do is create link, and this one is actually not unique, so I'll say link to an asset or maybe a facility or maybe something more specific, and then I'll create it. And now we have a new reference type that we can use later. So back to my facility schema. Let's pop open my HVAC models. Let me clean this up really quick. And let's say we already created all the reference types that we'd like, which we already have quite a bit within the schema. Now we have to go back to attributes, and instead of selecting one of the other options, we are going to select object. When we select object, we're going to be met with all of the object types that are in our schema, and we could go through and find the one that we'd like. So we could go through and let's say we want to pull in the offices. I could scroll through and find offices, and there it is. So this is going to be within the same schema, but you can see here that below this, we have a little header with different options. So this is going to be an entirely different schema. So that's our services schema, application portfolio, customer support. This is where we could create the relationships cross schemas instead of just within this one. For this demo, I'll just select offices since it's already here, and it's going to be a little bit easier to demo. So I'll click on that, and then we'll select the reference type, which is what we were just creating and looking at earlier. I'll keep it simple and just call it a link because we already have provided by, and I'll give this a name, office, keeping it very, very simple, and we'll add that. And now we have our object created, and we could go back to our object, our reference type created, could go back to our object, and when we click this drop down, we're met with all of these options, which are actually located in our office object type. So as soon as I add one here, I'll create a new object type for offices. Let's say test, this is new, just to make sure it's going to be completely unique, and we know that we just created it. So I'll create that. Let's go back to HVAC. Let's go open up one of our objects. We'll click the office drop down, and let's see if we could find that new one. Test, this is new. There we go. So we're pulling a live update or live options that we have of the objects that we've created in our offices, and we can link them together. So once we've added that link, on the very top right, you can see that we created a new reference. This is going to be an outbound reference. So we have a link out to test, this is new. And now that this reference is created, I could jump into this object in an entirely different object schema. And this is going to be our inbound reference. So we're linking out from our previous object type, and then we're linking into this one. So we could go back and forth and just jump between the two to make things really easy. And now we have that link built from the HVAC model side. So it only needs the link from one side. You can add a field from the so if I pull in this office here, we can add another link for our HVAC system from here, but it'll just create two references. So you don't necessarily want to do that. You definitely want to make sure that you're creating the right reference, whether it's inbound or outbound, and think through the way that you'll want to be selecting these and create it only once. Otherwise, you'll be duplicating your efforts. One other thing I'll mention here is that we can go into our settings for this particular field. So I'll go back to, let's go back to our facility schema, and we'll go into our attributes. And in here, when we actually create that object, we can go to our attribute settings, and we could filter in specific objects. So this is great for if you want only a subsection of those particular objects that we're pulling in. So let's go back to our asset schema, or I should go back to offices. And in here, let's say that we only want to pull in the office that we just created, wherever that is. That's not it. Test, this is new. Let's give this a very specific option with a drop down, if there is one, or maybe approver is Josh. And so now we're only going to be searching for something that has an approver of Josh. If it doesn't have that, it shouldn't show up in that filtered results. So let's go back to HVAC, go back to attribute, go back to filtering, and we will have a more advanced module on AQL and how to use this. You may already be familiar with JQL, in which case this is very similar to that, but we will be going over advanced AQL and tactics and how to use AQL in another module. So AQL, let's say approver, and we need the exact name actually, and I completely forgot what it was. So I'll just copy over the exact one from here, and we'll pull in that object, go to filters one more time, and filter or approvers equals, and we'll open a parentheses and just type in Josh. And once you have the check mark, that means you're good and your AQL looks good. So let's update that field. Now, when we go back to objects, instead of pulling in the full object of offices, we should only be able to pull in just this option. So let's clear it out and let's see if we could find it. So let's select the drop down, and there we go. We only have that one option because we filtered down to only those results. So that's great for if you're pulling in information, and let's say that these are offices, and you pulled in a field from HVACs that should only be in the US. So you could narrow that down to each of these offices being within a country of United States. That way you're not pulling in a list of things that you can't actually associate with that object to reduce errors. So just a quick trick there if you're trying to reduce the total number of items that are shown, if you have either too long of a list or those things just do not apply. Now that we've created a few different object relationships, let's dive into the object graph and see how it could give us a bird's eye view and a little bit more of a visual representation of all the relationships that we have within our assets. So I pulled together a demo schema here, and this is going to be something that's on-prem scanned. And it's going to give us a lot of different relationships. So this is going to be a really good demo of how this tool is very powerful. Let's jump into ABM group, and we'll go into our object graph, which is going to be on the top right. We could click this button here, and this will open up our visual representation of all the items that we have with relationships. So you can see it gets pretty crazy here, and no worries, we'll go over how to filter this down. But the general idea is that you have your different objects and you see the exact relationships with these arrows. So you have these outbound and inbound references to these different devices and hosts that we have on our network. On the right, we have some fields that are associated with this particular object. So this is a host. It's been scanned, it's currently running, it's a little bit old, but has information related to it that's been scanned directly from a physical environment. So we could also look at these linked work items from here, which we have none of right now, but these are going to be our Jira tickets or Jira work items that come in. And to actually start filtering this down and making this graph useful, because at this point it's going to be way too much information and very hard to track down exactly what you want to find, there's going to be a little settings icon, and we can click this settings icon to give us a couple of things that will help. So the reference step is the first thing that I like to set, and let's set this at 2. You'll see how it cleans up quite a bit. So we only create 2 different relationships, or we only go down 2 different relationships instead of 4. Once you go down more than 3 or 4, you start getting into a lot of different relationships. So depending on how far down you want to go, definitely set that number lower if you want to see less information. And the other thing is the reference type. So as we went over and created these before, this is where it's really helpful to narrow down exactly what you want to find within this object graph. Let's say I want to pull in only information, maybe just scan settings within my host, and I want to see nothing else. So I'll uncheck all of my options, and I don't have anything here, unfortunately. So let me pull in the network interface instead. So I have 4 different network interfaces, and I could see the object relationships and how they interact with the object. And let's say I want to set this at 3. Let's see if I pull in any more information. Nothing here. Let me add in maybe a CPU and an operating system. There we go. So now we have our object, which we were looking at previously. We have all of the network interfaces. We have the CPU. Then we have a few more items, and we could see that now we have a couple of levels of different objects being related to our original host. So I could keep going down this path, maybe add like 5, and let's see what we get now. This might be a little bit crazy, but let's find out. Nope, we're still good. So it looks like there's no more relationships created between these 2. But as we start adding back in our reference types, we'll start seeing more information as we go. So I definitely recommend unchecking some of these and going back through a few different items that you only want to see. That way you're not pulling in too much information and seeing too much things that you can't really keep track of anymore. So now that we have something like this, we can go through and see the discovery, we can see the scanning settings, we could see exactly all the information that's related to this host and how they're related. So let's think of this from maybe a business service perspective. Let's say that this host, I don't know if I have any relations. I don't have any relations to business services here, but let's say that this host supports a business service and an application on the front end that your company is hosting and providing to your customers. So you have your business service, let's say it's this item here, and you have your other business applications and supporting things and infrastructure, and then you're supporting host. So let's say that this host goes down. You could trace back exactly which service is going to go down with it. So let's say you need to take it down for some kind of maintenance or upgrades. and you open up a change management ticket, you could easily find and relate exactly which services, which front-facing client or customer items are going to be going down during that time frame or window of change. So if you're going through updating the storage on this device, you can add an outage time or downtime for these 3 particular services and notify your team, your department, your customers, etc. So that's one really simple and easy use case for this object graph. Obviously, you could get pretty in-depth with this, as you saw with all the object relationships that we have, but I recommend using some of these settings just to narrow down all of your options and see only what you want to see. So hopefully that helps, and I use this from time to time, not very often for things like maybe IT assets, but for anything on-prem or infrastructure related or business service and software related, I definitely use this quite a bit. Same thing with user and sometimes IT management if you want to see an object graph of what users are using, what hardware, that's also sometimes useful, but primarily for on-prem infrastructure and software related things, really great way to see a very, very visual way of how your objects interact.